Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Logical Nonsense Podcast. Today we have another loaded podcast. It is just me, myself, and I, Hunter Schuler, as your host. But we are going to get into this last week of football games, week 10, as well as looking forward to week 11. We are also going to get into Brent Faiyaz's new album review, as well as Larry June's new album review. Both very intriguing albums, a lot of soundscapes that I'm excited to talk about. And then finally, we are going to be ending it with my top 5 Air Force One collaborations of all time, inspired by the new Fragment Air Force One that will be coming out. So let's hop right into it. All right, starting first, we have the NFL Week 10 results. I will not be going through every game because I don't want to really talk about the Bears and the Panthers. What is there to talk about? Bryce Young, Tyson Bagent? I don't want to talk about those guys. All right. I already talked about them enough. So moving on to the Texans Bengals. Great game as I predicted. CJ Stroud looking like the MVP, Shout out to my boy Wayne on Ball and Breakfast. He called out, should he be in the MVP race conversation? The way he looked last game, with the way he looked the game previous to that last game, this man is looking pretty good. Did throw another pick. He's got 2 interceptions. Super concerning. That's the joke. 356 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. It's a great game, especially for a rookie, especially in a game where I feel like this team really needed to win if they wanted to be a wild card. Consider it. Both of these teams are wild card contenders, and so for them to get the head-to-head is huge. For them to get a win over this Bengals team who is looking much better than they were at the beginning of the season, and honestly we're really hot, is also huge. So definitely a huge win for CJ Stroud. I think it puts him on the map for MVP. I don't know if he loses this game, if we're necessarily seriously considering him as MVP. Yes, he put up 5 touchdowns last game, and some people may have been considering him. I think people looked at that and said, oh, it was against the Bucs. People consider the Bengals to be a more quote-unquote serious team, which is hilarious. There's hypocrisy in that in itself. I've already talked about that. Don't really need to go into it, but he definitely should be considered for MVP after a win like that, and I think he's considered for MVP in the eyes of others. Going to the next game I want to talk about, Josh Dobbs, man. What a man. 268 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 picks. He also puts up 44 yards on the ground and a touchdown. So Josh Dobbs looking like the man over there in Minnesota. A lot of people are like, yo, why is he just now getting discovered? Somebody put this pretty well. Sometimes it's just the right situation. He was put in the right situation. I think this Vikings team was starting to not peak, but definitely starting to get better right before Kirk Cousins looks down. And Josh Dobbs was able to fill those shoes pretty well. They now have 2 solid wins and are looking for a wild card contender for the NFC North after having a very rough start. Obviously, sad news for Kirk Cousins because I think he could have done even better things. I'm not trying to discredit what Josh Dobbs does. He obviously has been playing well, but he was playing really well before Josh Dobbs came in, and before Kirk Cousins went down. So I think definitely would be interesting to see what the Vikings could do with Kirk Cousins. I still think they could be a playoff team, especially considering how the NFC looks this year. So, shout out to the Vikings. Again, the Saints. I've been saying this all year. NFC South is just not good, man. They not a team from that division looks special to me. I can't even tell you which team is the best because they're all pretty bad. Steelers pick up another win. They're now 6-3. Probably one of the most improbable 6-3s. You have now 3 teams in the NFC North who are 6-3 and 1 team who's 5-4. That's quite incredible. I won't I mean, I'm going to continue to preach they are the toughest division in football right now. They continue to prove it, and it's mostly because of the defenses. Every defense in that league or in that division, I would say, is solid. Even a team like the Bengals, who I would say have the weakest defense in that league, have been able to come up solidly when need be. So definitely a tough division, and it's crazy to me that the Bengals are at the bottom of this division. Looking at the beginning of the year, would not have guessed that. All right, going to our next game, one that shocked me for sure. Niners Jacksonville. I've been on Jacksonville all year. I feel as though they were a very underrated team. Going into this game, they're 6-2 against a team like the Niners, who, as before mentioned, I knew they needed this win. This was something after losing 3 straight. They needed this for their confidence. They needed this for many different reasons. Having Debo back too helped. I'm not going to say it's what solely brought them the win, but it obviously does help when you're able to put up 34 points against a Jacksonville team whose defense has looked very solid. It's impressive. It's very impressive, actually. So 34-3, super impressive team against a very solid team. So, Brock Purdy, 3 touchdowns, no picks. That's huge. On the other side of the ball, Trevor Lawrence, you can't turn over the ball twice. And same with Travis Etienne, 35 yards is just not going to cut it. So obviously the offense wasn't able to get going, and the Jacksonville defense couldn't stop this team. So it's going to be interesting to see how Jacksonville bounces back. I still think they're the best team in the AFC South, even with the Texans' hot streak that they're on. But it will be interesting to see how they bounce back. Going to the next game, Browns-Ravens. I think the biggest storyline is the Browns coming back. The Ravens, some are saying we're the best team in the league. And honestly, with how the league has shaped out, I think they could have been considered for one of the best teams in the league. I don't necessarily know if I believe they were the best team in the league, mostly just because I think the Eagles, in the ways they have found to win games, I think is more impressive. However, this is a huge loss for Baltimore. I think they needed this win. They really did. Obviously, I think it's a bigger win for Cleveland than it is a loss for Baltimore, but I think there's definitely some doubters about this Ravens team now. Giving up a lead like that, you're up by 16 at one point, 15 at one point. You can't be doing that, especially as we near postseason, especially against a team like the Browns. I know Deshaun Watson gets announced. He's out for the year. We'll see how the Browns can recoup their team. Granted, they're 6-3, and Watson's played how many games? I think a lot of people are worried about this Browns team now. Like, oh, can they win games? They've been winning games. I think he's only played he's only played 6 games. They're 6-3. I don't know how many of those wins were with him. I don't have those stats in front of me. I don't believe it was every single game, though. As a matter of fact, I know PJ Walker won 2 of those games. Pretty sure he won against the Niners and the Colts. So I think they're going to be fine. This defense is one of the best in the league. Some argue is the best in the league. They'll be fine. As far as the Ravens, they'll also be fine. I think the Browns can still sneak in. Chargers, Lions. Last second field goal by the Lions. I mentioned in the Ball and Breakfast podcast that I thought that this could happen. When it comes down to clutch time, the Chargers just aren't that team. You can't trust them. Chargers fans need to be reconsidering. Herbert, great game. 4 touchdowns, 323 yards, 1 pick. What more can you ask from that man? Keenan Allen has 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is the offense that you want. The Chargers just can't get it done. They're one of those teams that all year long have had close games, and when it matters against the good teams, they don't win. They just don't. The Lions, on the other hand, continue to impress me. I know they had the really bad loss against the Ravens. Considerably so, that should worry some people. Other than that, they've looked solid all year. They've beat good teams. They're 7-2. This is probably the best Detroit Lions team we've seen in over a decade. All the hype on them has been correct, which is weird. Doesn't usually happen that way. So good for the Lions. Happy for their organization. Seahawks, for people to be saying they're a Super Bowl contender, I know that Washington's a frisky team, but still, people to be saying they're a Super Bowl contender when they barely pull out this win, 29-26. Another game that concerns me, man. It's like, what are you doing here? Especially after how they lost the week, how they lost the week previous to the Ravens. They come off a loss of the Ravens 37-3, and now they barely win against this Commanders team. That's concerning. We'll see how they can bounce back against the Rams, especially considering, they lost that game at the beginning of the year to the Rams. Can they get their revenge game? Division rivals are something you don't want to mess with in this league. It obviously still matters. So, finally, can't wait to talk about that. Broncos fans, Broncos country, let's ride, baby! Huge win for the Broncos. I can't sit here and tell you that I believe in this team fully. Do I have some belief? Yes. There was some point where I was at probably 2% hope on this team. It's back up to probably a 55% hope. This is a big win. Big win for the Broncos. I know a lot of teams or a lot of people are going to discredit this win because the Bills haven't looked themselves, and they haven't. And, it's disappointing to see because I think there was a good stretch for the Bills there. But they need to get out of this lull. They need to wake up. Or people are going to start getting fired. I'm pretty sure they just fired their OC, if I'm not mistaken. So the Bills lost this one too. 12 men on the field, as well as the PI. Those are things you can't have at the late of the game and clutch time. The Broncos gritted out this win, and I think it's going to be huge for this team, especially. A lot of people are going to look at we've now beat the Chiefs and we've now beat the Bills, who in the past have been some of the best teams. So it's very, very good for the Broncos' confidence. However, I would like to remind people the Broncos are still 4-5. Yes, they've won 3 games in a row. They're still 4-5. They still have a lot of work to do. Is there still a lot of season left? Of course, I think they could go on a little run, maybe, but I'm not hopeful, as I just mentioned. So, all right, going on to Week 11 preview. Thursday Night Football, we have a good one. Bengals, Ravens. Again, after losing to the Texans, I think every game is almost a must-win for the Bengals at this point. If you're going to want to be a wild card team, you're going to want to secure this one, especially against a division rival, especially with the way they lost to them last time. I think the Bengals will pull this one out. In prime time, I think Joe Burrow is going to have that shiesty mask on. He's going to put on for his team. And I think that loss to the Ravens was a little demoralizing. Lamar will continue to look great, but I could see the rest of this team looking not like themselves after kind of being demoralized, like I said, by the Browns. So I'll go with the Bengals there. Steelers, Browns. God, man. AFC North always be playing each other, I swear. I know that every AFC North team or any division team only plays each other twice, but I swear to God, these teams be playing more than others. And I don't know how to explain it, but Steelers, Browns. This one's tough. I think I'll go with the Browns though. Coming back the way, or actually, I'll go with the Steelers just because I don't know who's going to be for the Browns QB, and yes, they won in the past, but knowing the Steelers defense, knowing Mike Tomlin, how smart he is, I think he's going to get it done against this Browns team. So Bears, Lions. Lions are hot. I got to go with the Lions here. Not much more to be said. Tyson Badgett isn't him. And even if Justin Fields comes back, I don't think he's going to be himself. So Chargers, Packers. Herbert, man, he's going to pull out a win. People are going to start believing in the Chargers. Chargers beat bad teams. The Packers are a bad team. So give me the Chargers. Raiders, Dolphins. Just as the Chargers beat up on bad teams, so do the Dolphins. Give me the Dolphins. Tua, Magic. It's crazy to me the Raiders are 5-5 though. They've won now 2 or 3 games without McDaniels, and I think that just says something about how bad of a coach Josh McDaniels really is. I mean, he couldn't coach the Broncos, worse shit, and now the Raiders have won 2 straight without McDaniels. I hate to say there's a common denominator here, but I do like to point out the obvious. So, Giants, Commanders. I believe the Giants won this matchup last time. And you know what? Because the NFL is so inconsistent, I'll take the Giants again. Cowboys, Panthers. Gotta go with the Cowboys here. I feel like Cowboys are another team that really take advantage of the bad teams. Other than the Cardinals' loss, they've looked solid against bad teams. They haven't played down to their level, so I'll go with the Cowboys. Titans, Jags. The Jags really need this one. I don't think the Titans are in the game anymore. So I'm gonna go with the Jags. Expect a bounce back game from Lawrence and Etienne. Honestly, I could totally see that. The Jags have not played the Titans this year, so that'll be an interesting test for them. Titans usually have a pretty solid defense, but I don't think Lawrence will struggle against it. He'll be fine. Cards, Texans. Give me that Stroud magic, man. He's hot. He doesn't look like he can be stopped, and I don't think the Cardinals of all teams are gonna stop him. So Bucks, Niners. I'll go with the Niners. Another team, they just had a very solid 34-3 win. I would be shocked if they play down to the Bucks level. I think they kind of liked secretly that a lot of people were doubting them after the 3 losses, and I think they're going to stomp on this team. Bills, Jets. This is a revenge game for the Bills. Expect them to have some extra motivation in this game because of that. Seahawks, Rams, another revenge game. Expect the Seahawks to win this one. Vikings, Broncos. This one's an interesting one. I don't really know how to judge it. Broncos are hot, but so are the Vikings. I think this is weirdly going to be a good game for Sunday Night Football. The Broncos are the favorite, even though they're 4-5. I think it's because of the way they've been playing. Russell Wilson has been looking very solid, very much so like his old self. He's top of the league in stats in multiple categories. I'm not saying he's number 1, but he's like top 5 in multiple categories. So good for him. I'm gonna give it to the Broncos. This just seems like the Broncos are back kind of game. 2 weeks back to back where we're in prime time. So people will start believing in the Broncos again. Again, I don't know if I have the full hope, but I'll give the Broncos on this one. And Monday night, absolute bangers. Eagles, Chiefs, rematch of the Super Bowl. Oh, give me the Eagles. A lot of revenge games this week, and I think the Eagles are going to get their revenge on the Chiefs. A lot of people, I think, are going to be expecting a shootout. I don't think so. I think it's going to be much more defensive and strategic than people think. So I'll go with the Eagles there though. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's not like super exciting. So okay, moving into first, we will start with the Brent Faiyaz album. Brent Faiyaz, he had a great album release a year ago. very anticipated. He's really grown to be loved by many people with Wasteland. He's grown tremendously in popularity. And then he releases Larger Than Life. It's a short album, really short album, 36 minutes total. It has 14 songs. And with that being said, I very rarely say this, but if you're going to have a 14-song album, which is actually the length I like, I think that 12 to 14 range is usually the good sweet spot for me. They can't all be like 1 to 3 minute songs. I think there were some really great songs and some songs I'd like to highlight. You look at song like Best Time, Outside All Night, Wherever I Go, um, Upset, On This Side, Where You At. Like, those are great songs. And I think the thing that I'm missing with those songs is just more content, extended editions of those songs. He has great melodies. Of course, his vocals were on par. However, you look at a project like Wasteland, and I just felt like there was more effort put into it. This one felt at times like there was a little bit of cruise control, which he can do and he can get away with because he's so good at his craft. But maybe I'm being overcritical. I just felt as though we've seen more creativeness from him and better projects from him as in Wasteland. So hoping that he can get back to that kind of creativity on his next project, as well as extend some of that content. Put a little bit more into that. Put in a few more verses, that kind of thing. So, and then going into the Larry June album, very interesting album overall. Larry June, he's an interesting rapper. This is his second album of the year. He released The Great Escape earlier in the year with him and The Alchemist. And here he releases an album with him and Cardo. Completely different albums. The Great Escape, I felt as though was a much more hardcore lyricist, lyrical album. Whereas you look at a project like this, and I get that old school West Coast feel. You can hear the influence of that 90s laid back West Coast feel, and I loved it. Super, super enjoyable to listen to. I feel as though this is an album where most of the songs you could put on late at night with your friends when you're cruising, you got the top down. This is greatly executed on the production level on telling a story. And I also really loved the way he experimented. Again, common theme throughout this year, something I've talked about many times. Experimentation's been key throughout this year. People are trying new things. We're seeing things that artists haven't done in the past. And I think that's just coming from a overall consensus from fans that we get the same music. We often give that comment. You look at, I don't know why this is coming to mind, but the baby sounds the same, or Gunna sounds the same in every song he makes. Like, insert the artist, and I think we constantly are saying, oh, it all sounds the same. Like, he just sounds the same in every song. I think artists are getting tired of that comment, and I think it's causing people to experiment, which both good and bad. We've seen some people try a little hard, kind of go outside of what I think they're capable of. Larry June, I don't think really went outside of what he's capable of. He kind of went into that monotone singing. That was actually good, especially on these laid back beats, catchy choruses. He did well on that. It's definitely Cali rap, man. He's from San Francisco. It's that Bay Area rap that I'm used to. He's a hard hitter, but I feel as though his voice, that super deep voice, sounded super good on these, I would say, poppy beats. Poppy but laid back. A lot of head boppers, a lot of stuff that's like something you can kind of get into super easily. Yes, it was contradicting, like I said. but it fits. There's some good features on this. I also like the way he was able to bring in the voice fluctuations, as well as the tone changes. Um, do I think every song is great on this? No. I think a song like Glass House Knocking, super boring flow. I think some of his flows were executed super poorly. And I think that's an example of somewhere where he tried to experiment and failed. But overall, I think, he's bringing in new ideas. Has a few love songs on here, something much different than The Great Escape. Uh, he brings in a lot of variety of topics, flows. Production was mostly, I would say, similar. There's a few outliers, but I would say it's mostly similar. He brought in great features. I would rate this album probably like a 7.4. I think it's one of the better on the year. Do I think it's better than The Great Escape? I'd have to give it more listens. I need more replayability. This sounds like a replayable album, but I just listened to it. It's really easy for me to say this, oh, I love this album, when I just listened to it. So I'll definitely have to give it some time before I can say that it's better than The Great Escape. I thought The Great Escape was a great album, but it's not for everyone. Larry June's not for everyone. He's a very deep, monotone spitter. So, all right, and then going into our last segment, with the new Fragment Air Force Ones, there's been a lot of silhouettes with the Air Force One. A lot of colorways, a lot of collaborations. It's one of the most iconic shoes in sneaker history. And so it makes sense why it's been so altered with and why it's been collaborated on. It's a very wearable shoe. With that being said, I just want to make a quick top 5 Air Force Ones of all time. For me, collaborative. These are only collaborative. I did not give Air Force One, the white, that's of course going to be one, but it's too easy of an answer. So starting off, number 5, Supreme Air Force One. I think this one hit shelves and it's been a staple. I think the box logo to the back heel, it's very simple. And yes, some people are like, oh, that shouldn't be considered. These are two of the biggest icons in the streetwear industry. For them to collaborate on a staple like the Air Force One was huge. I think it's an instant sellout. It's super wearable. Sometimes with these collaborations, it's not always wearable. You can't always pull it out of your closet because there's such this big collaboration and they've got these huge prints. You literally just added a box logo Supreme to the Air Force white Air Force One, and I think it was genius by both sides. Why not trying too hard, just collaborating subtly? I think it's great. So at number 4, I think I'm gonna go with the off-white Air Force Ones. I think speaking to what they were able to do, off-white, I don't need to speak too much on this. The deconstruction, but also putting it, together. At the time, it was huge. It sold well. I think it's got these vibrant colors to them, depending on which one. You get. It altered it to the point where it's super recognizable, especially with the air and the tag, as well as the swoosh. But I also think, again, something that makes this a great collaboration is super wearable. So that's why I have it number 4. Number 3, I'm going to go with the Rockefeller Air Force One. When I think of iconic sneakers, the Rockefeller Air Force One always comes to mind. These are huge, man. Rockefeller was a huge influence in hip-hop, and hip-hop and streetwear go together. This was a collaboration amongst multiple levels that was hit well. As I said before, white Air Force Ones mean so much to the culture of streetwear, to the history of fashion in hip-hop and collaborating, and for them to put the Rockefeller stamp, which is so iconic, from Biggs, it's huge, man. I think one of the, if not, some would argue this is the best Air Force One collaboration. But I think looking at that, it's crazy. Just absolutely nuts. So, number two, I have the Travis Scott Air Force One Cactus Jack. These are ridiculous. I think these are one of the first, or not one of, these are one of the first shoes that I look at, and it's one of the first collaborations Travis Scott had with Nike, and it really just started his whole brand, which has been so successful with Nike. I think Nike was really looking for their next hip hop artist that could bring them revenue after Kanye left, and he did that very successfully with this shoe. It's dope. It's iconic. Again, gum bottoms, silver swoosh. Excuse me. These are the Air. The metallic swoosh, the gum bottoms. I mean, this is an iconic shoe. Again, super super wearable. Put them on the map. Put Nike on the map with Travis Scott. Super successful. So that's why I have them at number two. And at number one, I think I'm gonna go with the PlayStation Nike Air Force Ones. Absolutely insane. One of the most sought after shoes. It's executed to perfection. The gradient blue to purple PlayStation logo, the white. I mean, it's super wearable again, but nobody's going to wear these. There's only 150 made. It's great. Just beautifully, beautifully executed. And that's my number one. Let me know if you think the Fragment Air Force Ones will compete with any of these shoes. If you think my list is trash, let me know. Yeah, appreciate you guys listening. Kind of a shorter podcast. We have a couple collaborations coming up next week, so be sure